Hello, everyone, and welcome back to This Week in Enterprise Tech. I'm Hyoun Park from Amalgam Insights, and today we've got a special guest host, Ken Gonzalez. Hey, Kengon, how are you?
I'm doing good, Yoon. It's great to be here, and I realize I'm not Charlie, but I am representing the shaved head contingent, so that's always a good thing.
Very
I'm
smooth
lead
look.
advisor with Pretty Simple Group, and just really overjoyed to have a chance to be chatting.
Yeah, terrific. And we have got a big week for you to wrap up. There's all sorts of things that happened on the vendor side, on the government side, and even some weird stories around running robots. So let's dig into this. First off, I'm going to start with Tableau conference. So Tableau conference was last week. In full transparency, I was there as an attendee, but Tableau has long been a market leader in the analytics space. Not a surprise. It is a vendor that came out, call it, 20-ish years ago. And at the time, we had a definition of business intelligence, but when we looked at that world, it was mostly companies like Business Objects, Hyperion, Cognos, MicroStrategy, all these really heavy, hard to use technology solutions. And Tableau came in and said, we're really just going to focus in on the data analyst. And that ended up being where they went. This time around for Tableau Next, what I found interesting is a couple of things. One is that they focused in on agentic analytics, so using agents to dig into the BI stuff. But also, there's an increasing integration with Salesforce's platform elements. So they're taking in things like Salesforce Flow and turning that into Tableau's workflow automation capability. They're taking Salesforce's data cloud and turning that into Tableau's data layer, really adding pieces where they haven't necessarily had Tableau capabilities before. So I'm curious what you thought about that, Ken.
Well, two things. First off, is I think that the whole notion of platform thinking and being able to leverage tools like Tableau in that context make a whole lot of sense.
Mhm.
I think from the functionality that one would typically expect from an end user's perspective, using those tools, I think it opens up a lot of different opportunities as for the person who's consuming, as well as a lot of opportunities for Salesforce to be able to, hey, we have now a broader, more, what would I say? I just lost the word mid thought. Uh, More accessible way of being able to find out about all the different elements that are part of our ecosystem that represent the underlying engine.
Mhm.
I also think it represents a real change in workforce dynamics. Because when we talked about tools in the past, we would talk about them in like a three-tier strategy, like with coding tools, like no
Mhm.
code, low code, and developer, high code. With the intro of AI tools, the borders between what we used to, call these three buckets are now more porous than ever, in some cases, disappearing entirely. So I think we really do need to start questioning the underlying assumptions around how a given role is defined, what people need to be responsible for, and what the core knowledge, skills, and abilities are that are required to properly interpret what the tools can provide them and how they're going to provide value.
Yeah, I think about this a lot in the data analyst context where back in the day, you made a report and maybe that report would get copied into a document. And that was the
Mhm.
end all and be all. But now you're creating these reports and charts and visualizations, and you might copy and paste that into a presentation, or you might put that into a document. You might
Yeah.
make it accessible with an API. It might be part of its own analytic application. It might be accessed through an agent. There are so many different things that seemingly simple visualization or chart can be now as a data object, as an
Yes.
application piece of the puzzle. And it has to be supported from a, a no code graphic perspective, a low code perspective, and as actual code for the grown-ups in the room who are still building actual apps, right? So
Yeah.
that's a lot to have to figure out from an IT management perspective, a data management perspective, because you can't just make it one thing and just hope that it works.
Well, it gets worse than that because really, when you think about it, going back to your historical example, in back in the day, it was expected that when I produce that, well, that's what it is. It's an
Static. Yeah.
artifact unto itself at a point in time snapshot. But really, when you get down to it, now what we're seeing is this can actually be providing a near real time or real time view into what it's trying to actually render and display. So even though there might be a way of capturing that point in time and then using that, fact of the matter is we have to account for the fact that this could be part of an operational dashboard, which will continue to vary, or the use and the context in which we need to hold that item could be constantly changing.
Yeah. So I'm cautiously optimistic about this. I think Tableau's next moves speak towards that future that the data analyst has to think about, where data artifacts, data reports are now living and ongoing and real time. But let's face it, the data world is going to have to adjust to this because we know what we've expected from data analysts and data reporters for many, many years, and that those expectations are changing really quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So next story we had was an interesting one, looking at one of America's great companies, Intel, selling off 51% of the Altera acquisition that they made back in 2015 to private equity firm Silver Lake. I think this is interesting because Lip Bhutan recently took over as CEO after um, after the failed kind of CEO stint previously. And Intel's had a lot of problems. Let's just face it, over the years. So it looks like they are finally starting to uh, tighten the belt and figure out what is next for Intel. And it looks like they are getting rid of non-profitable pieces of the puzzle in the process, of which there are many.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think there's an old saying, at least it's old for me because I've been saying it for years. All good software is eventually turned into hardware.
Mm-hmm.
And really, let's face it, today, Intel is really a marketing and mass distribution company, silicon at scale. So I think that there was a good kernel of truth behind why the acquisition made sense at the time, looking for adjacencies and thinking about data center and IoT as, oh, those could be interesting directions for us, but
Yes.
without a
Mm-hmm.
clear picture of how those areas were going to result in created packages that would be able to operate at a similar scale. I think it was a pretty risky bet. So
Mm-hmm.
probably not an ideal fit in the first place. So I think the sale is actually a really good idea. uh, Going private equity gives them a chance to focus and get reoriented on some new directions while not being burdened with like life at Intel, which is just, hey, we're going to manage you just like another business unit. Because the expectations there are just too high for something that hasn't been quite sorted out yet.
Yes, for a long time, Intel has been being like what we kind of thought of as the old IBM, just too big to fail and always just running on its own. And with finally with the last CEO, Pat Gelsinger, Gelsinger realized that Intel needed changed and tried to do it through massive investment. And finally, Intel's board kind of said that they just were too gun shy to be able to go all in on that vision. So now they're going to go in with this Liputan vision that of cutting costs and really rationalizing the company to
Yeah.
what it really focuses on. And I think that, like IBM, the end result of this will be getting rid of things like, the PC is going over to Lenovo, and while IBM focuses on what they really do best, those core
Yeah.
workloads and mainframes and related materials and related services. And I expect Intel will end up as a very similarly consolidated type of
Yeah.
company.
Without a doubt.
Mm-hmm. All right. Next up, speaking of big workloads, we're seeing in the UK, there's right now a bit of a fight around Microsoft licensing. That Microsoft Azure uh, and Microsoft workloads seem to be as we know, priced to be preferentially supported on Azure Cloud. Who would
What?
have thought that Microsoft would do such a thing with its pricing? And apparently, Amazon and other cloud providers are kind of miffed about this and pointing out, hey, Microsoft customers could save a lot of money if they could move some of those Microsoft server workloads over to Amazon and Google, right? So it's kind of an interesting thing to watch right now overseas. I'm sure we're going to see similar types of lawsuits here and around the world.
So what? Vendor lock-in is a thing?
Huh?
Really? Who knew?
Yes. But I think that the thing is, in the EU and the UK related markets, they've always been a little bit iffy about having monopolistic behavior.
Hmm.
They push that a little harder than we do here in the States, and I think the having that ability to be able to actually push against the Microsofts and Amazons of the world is interesting because we're starting to see really a kind of a breaking down of the IT markets. Like the European market is starting to become very different from the American market in terms of what is allowed from a bundling and vendor protection perspective.
Yeah, well, in a certain sense, I actually think this is healthy
Mhm.
because from a cloud provider's perspective, I think that we're talking about commodity capabilities. So when you talk about compute, when you talk about storage, it's like, okay, great. So compute's compute, storage is storage. They're functionally equivalent, but that's doesn't necessarily translate directly into what customers care about because
Mhm.
the thing I can see in this is, and I think that the thing that Microsoft has done well has been to stay close to the what I would call the mission essential task that people need to perform, and then being able to use those to directly tie into productivity tools, which is really your key to unlock premium pricing.
Yeah.
And if you want to maintain that price point, then you're going to find new ways of being able to stay close to what the person actually needs to do. And I think it's part of the larger shift that both companies and vendors need to get their heads wrapped around because it's not just old stuff with a new coat of paint. It's asking and responding to the question, what does the new world of work actually require from us? What do we need to build in order to have people actually be productive? And from all of the things that we've been seeing recently, I think that this is kind of the core question that ties all of these things together.
Yes, I find it a little bit odd that in a world where we have Kubernetes and virtual machines, that we are still talking about linking workloads to hardware in
Right?
such a proprietary way. It's like, how is this even possible? It's 2025. Like we were talking about the future of all this going away a decade ago. You have
Yeah.
written so much about this. Like
Yeah. Exactly.
oh boy. But so that'll be fun to watch. And I am always hoping that every new precedent that gets driven in any country in this direction is a step forward towards
Yeah.
greater IT flexibility.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. So there are a lot of other large commitments being made to spending. NVIDIA, it's hard to escape NVIDIA's touch in the technology
Right.
world. They are always talking about their next big investment, their next big chip, their next big impact on AI. And last week, NVIDIA announced a $500 billion commitment to US manufacturing, which, big numbers. But I find
Yeah.
it funny that that matches the $500 billion commitment that OpenAI made to manufacturing, US manufacturing in January. So I guess 500 billion is the new billion. It's like if you're a large tech vendor, you're just starting to run out of big numbers to be able to throw.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, but that aside, US manufacturing for tech has actually been kind of a dead end for a long time.
Yeah.
And do you think that all these commitments can actually lead to better manufacturing, more manufacturing actually coming to the US?
Well, that's actually a really good question, because I think that one of the things that definitely was a factor in driving this is the whole idea around, tariffs bad, need advantage, onshore is good.
Mhm.
It's overly simplistic, but pretty predictable logic. I think the key question will become, is this bet a good one? Given the flip-flop nature of the current administration, even a market darling like NVIDIA needs to pay close attention to development costs and cost of goods sold. So when you consider what the cost and the timeline is for the build out, as well as the impact on the cost of the silicon it's going to produce, things can turn sour in a heartbeat, especially if there's significant changes in market dynamics and demand for what they're going to produce, or the penalty structure could be quite significant.
Yeah, I what I find odd is NVIDIA is pretty much sold out for the next 2 years in terms of its chips and capabilities. You know, it just runs this crazy business where they sell whatever they can make as fast as anybody can buy it. But even for NVIDIA, making a big manufacturing commitment is hard because building up any sort of plant is a 3, 4, 5, 10 year
Right?
process. How can you plan 5 to 10 years in advance when you are literally changing the rules of the game
Yeah.
week to week? You know, that's just a problem regardless of what kind of policies you put in place.
Yeah.
Businesses want stable working environments at the end of the day, even if they are constricting and high tax and have all sorts of bad rules from a regular corporate regulatory perspective. If you can keep it consistent, businesses can figure out how to work with that.
Yes.
But this lack of consistency, I'm really interested in seeing how. So 500 billion from NVIDIA, 500 billion from OpenAI and SoftBank and Oracle. You know, so we've got literally $1 trillion committed to U.S. manufacturing over, call it the Trump administration years, and I'm fascinated to see how that turns out just from a practical perspective. How do you align
Yeah.
$1 trillion and spend with completely uncertain business environment?
It's definitely going to be interesting. That's for sure.
hmm yes. So, of course, we just talked about AI with NVIDIA, but we're also seeing the idea of AI being a virtual worker. So, the Wall Street Journal recently came out with this interesting story talking about how AI might be driving us towards more of a 24 by 7 economy. One of the quotes in here was about from Aaron Levy, Box CEO, once wonderkind, turned Silicon Valley staple, and now one of the things he brought up was the idea that if I have an idea at 10 or 11 p.m., I used to have to figure out if there was a night owl on my team who could help me with a research project. Now I can toss it over to AI, have it go through a deep thinking process and analysis. And when I'm up at 6 or 7 a.m., I can look at the results of that. And the idea of this AI as a night shift, I found to be an interesting one. And I was curious what you thought.
Well, the thing I really found curious about this is I really think this taps into the whole notion of the evolution of the nature of work.
Mhm.
That's the thing that we need to consider. Because at the end of the day, when you're the person that's got the idea and you want that person to, and whether that's a virtual person or an actual person, what are you paying for? You're
Mhm.
actually paying for results, not effort. So I think it really starts to show some of the shallowness around behind many organizations' RTO mandates because you want to be able to justify spend for resources that you can't easily drop, right? And not just have the perception of productivity, like, oh, look at all the people. No, we also need to consider the unintended consequences, like all the meeting rooms are full and we don't have enough space for us to collaborate in a meaningful way to take and move that thing forward. So the next few years are going to be quite telling. What are companies in the marketplace actually going to be rewarded for? Results or effort? And when you think about the night shift as a source of leverage, as your um, your ability to push down the accelerator.
Mm-hmm.
Again, about results, not just about, moving the mechanics or turning the crank on the factory.
Yeah, I find it interesting that we are increasingly going to be asked to be job orchestrators. And our job might be to spend 2 hours a day to coordinate 24-hour a day commitments, job commitments, or AI work, or whatever else it might be. And our job is just to know what work needs to be done and to be able to prioritize those efforts, and then to be able to proofread and check the work that is being done. So both of us, having come from the analyst world, we started as analysts by writing the reports, and over time you get to that research director or that editor position where you spend probably more time overseeing other analysts' work than you do on your own work. We've both been there, and I feel like that is kind of a skill that everybody else is going to have to learn. No matter how technical you think your job is, your actual job is going to increasingly be more about orchestration and making sure that you are having a high level of utilization for your resources, not all of which are human.
Well, this is an interesting point, which actually ties both back into the last thing we talked about, as well as, we also had on the agenda to be able to talk about Project Stargate a little
Mm-hmm.
bit. Um, so when I think about it, and your point about, okay, now I am going to be the coordinator, making sure that all of the outputs that are coming from these agentic tools are now suitable for what we're going to. There's how many people are now being displaced
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
that were doing those roles before, where it was just turning the crank, that we are now the coordinator for. Um, where did they go? What
Mm-hmm.
are they doing? How do they fit in the new world of work? That's why this thing really is so like upfront for me to think about, because if I consider that, and I was having this customer or conversations with customers not too long ago, where it's, you just can't say that, well, the work I'm doing now, I like what I'm doing, I'm going to keep doing it. Well, maybe not.
Right.
You may not have the opportunity to keep doing that work. You need to intentionally expand your view and think about, where can I now add value in an ecosystem that is less dependent on people than ever. And because if I can do any level of task automation, I'm probably going to see that go away.
Mm-hmm.
Which, for a lot of people, if you are not scared, you should be.
I I try to be an optimist. But I do think it is vitally important for people to understand why their job matters and what
Yes.
the actual outputs are supposed to
True.
be. Yeah. Like, my job is not to check over 1,000 lines and make sure A equals B.
Right.
That those lines of data have some sort of purpose. Those rows mean something. What we're trying to do is probably close the books, or we're trying to do some sort of revenue matching,
Right.
right, and assurance to make sure we're not being ripped off. Like, the goal is don't get ripped off, not check each
Right.
row of data exactly from a manual perspective. Like, if there's a better way to do that, you have to figure out how to manage that better
Yeah.
way to do it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, we're living in a strange world, no doubt about it. But I also think that, to some extent, this is a commitment we make when we get into tech. We know our world's going to change every 5 to 10 years. We just don't know how.
Yeah. No, very true. And also, I think that this onset of new technology has really changed the game in terms of what the pace to expect is going to be,
Hmm.
because we are now seeing changes and evolutions in how the technology affects how we do our work at a pace that's really unprecedented.
Yep, absolutely. And just kind of as a specific example of that, the FinOps, so Cloud FinOps cost management company, DoiT, just came out with its own automation capabilities for FinOps, product called CloudFlow, which I will admit the press release to me was a little bit buzzwordy for my taste. Let me just give you a quick example. It starts by saying, DoiT, a global leader in enterprise-grade FinOps and cloud intelligence, announced the release of DoiT CloudFlow, a powerful automation action engine within the DoiT Cloud Intelligence Platform. The AI-powered no-code technology streamlines cloud management by automating actions on FinOps recommendations, including right-sizing or migrating workloads, scheduling resources, tagging assets, and more. So my analyst brain simplifying this says, okay, so you're automating the right sizing of workloads and asset tagging. Like that's all I got out of that entire paragraph, right? And like everything else was just like, yeah, you added a bunch of words.
Well, certainly got 2 thumbs up for me for getting everything but the kitchen sink included.
Yes, I know. So much there. But I think that jokes aside, there is this challenge in IT management right now where there's a lot of focus put on visualizing and monitoring, but it's still hard to take action on everything that is taking place. And you know, and goofing aside, I think it's good that their product is starting to think about how to actually place some of these orders and right size some of these workloads and actually do something for a change.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, I think it's a really good point. I think that one of the things I've been saying for the past couple of years, especially as we've been seeing, the activity on the AI front,
Mm-hmm.
is there's been I don't know necessarily if I would say how orderly it was, but
Mm-hmm.
there definitely is a progression going from like the general AI capability around AI, machine learning, and workflow tooling down to seeing things which are now vendor specific, where, oh, great, I have all of this kind of raw engine material that I can use. Now, how do I use it with my technology? So, which leads to a lot of vendor specific implementations where it's now, okay, great, we can do this. You're going to like it, try it. So, pricing and functionality, yeah, it's still got a lot to be worked out in terms of like the basic interaction and billing models. But now the next thing is looking to see how it can be applied in a vertical or a specialized context. So,
Mm-hmm.
like with FinOps, or choose your domain of interest. I think there's a lot of opportunity for being able to, as long as we're staying close to specialties, scenarios, and use cases, this is a really good direction. And at
Mm-hmm.
the same time, it also gives us like, wow, there's a lot of different ways you can take and slice the onion. So it's not just like one thing. So it's going to continue to place demands on the adopting organization to think about, well, gee, how do we best consume whatever the market has available to us? So I don't think it's going to get less complex anytime soon. With the next layer down being personalization, where because data is really critical in all of this, you might find that one particular vendor's take on it is, well, we have this data available. We have an engine which can actually go through and look and make these assumptions or take these assumptions and now take action on them. Well, what if you now start bringing other data in? How is that going to shape the way that that particular platform goes and helps you do things better? And I think that's a real area of opportunity because we see lots of custom model development. We see lots of ways of being able to use that. And it's not going to get easier anytime soon.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that this is one of those areas when I look at the future of work, this is really the silver lining because
Yes.
it gives you the opportunity now to start thinking about, okay, we need people paying attention to that. If I'm not doing busy work, I could actually devote my attention there. But that's going to
Yeah, and
require some reskilling. That's going to require some attention being paid to it that is we're just have not been used to as an industry really doing.
yeah, that personalization case, I like. There's a lot of things that are changing in our roles, and if there's a basic change, like our role suddenly needs a whole lot of new unstructured data, that might mean we need a bigger pipe, obviously, from a network perspective. So something as simple as I need to 10x that pipe in my remote office to take care of this. And then I need to set up the storage on the back end so that we have more active storage for some stuff. And then maybe we need to dump a whole lot into archive. Just all these little things that need to be done from an IT perspective when we say we want to personalize IT and improve the role-based access to technology, assets, and services, right?
Yeah.
It's easy to say that, and it's easy to say cloud, but it's
Yeah.
actually harder than that, right?
Definitely. Well, and I might have a nice data lake sitting out there. Well, am I actually now collecting data? Are the streams actually flowing in that have good data for me to be able to get interesting answers to questions that I have? It very well might not be. So, how do you now go about acquiring the structured or unstructured data and looking to see, is this the right stuff? There's so many different opportunities to be thinking about how we use the new technology. It's just it's both a lot of fun and also represents a lot of potential work.
Yeah.
Even if you have tools helping you do the scrubbing and the extract, transform, and reload.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that combination of role-based or personalized IT and cost reconciliation and and optimization is really going to be an interesting challenge that is going to require a whole lot of new tools. That's an area where I think automation is actually going to help a whole lot because right now there's just too many orders and too many
Yeah,
possible scenarios to be able to figure out manually.
yeah, absolutely. I'm
Mhm.
with you.
Ah, so yeah, so automation doesn't always have to be bad. There's seems to be some opportunities for automation to actually help us out with our work as well. Unfortunately, we ran into a story where some companies, some organizations don't seem to have the same level of visualization as others. We ran into an interesting whistleblowing document actually
Yeah,
from on DOGE from experienced DevOps architect. It's actually a really interesting document. We do not have time to go over the
no,
entire document in detail, but it is a fascinating read,
yes,
both on how the whistleblowing approach occurs, what government DevOps people are aware of, and kind of the work that is being done behind the scenes. But basically, uh, I would say there's a level of uh, access being provided to government data that is honestly extremely surprising that I would have never thought was possible. What do you think about this, Ken?
I have to tell you, when I saw this and read through it, I was like, oh, that's
Mhm.
smart. Um, you know, that there are significant risk, security, and continuity gaps in any organization, let
Mhm.
alone a public government organization, is not surprising to me. I think that just having the laws and regulations that are mandating, security risk and continuity, it's just
Mhm.
not enough. It comes down to the work to be done, who's doing it, and how performance is measured. Because how you reward or penalize someone is going to partially, at least partially, drive their behavior. Because people want to do well and they want to avoid pain. I think that's
Mhm.
pretty predictable. Now, to take it further, I would never say that there's no fraud, waste, or abuse going on in government, especially at the federal level. But the how you go about doing that, how you manage large scale change and transformation is a very, very tricky exercise. And it's not something that you can do without a good amount of thought and communication amongst all of the agencies and the actors that are engaged in seeing that provide the benefit to the people that it's supposed to be benefiting. And quite frankly, I'm not seeing that. And
Yes,
that's the thing that's most concerning to me when I look at it both from the analyst perspective as well as from a personal perspective.
yes. So this particular whistleblowing incident was looking at the National Labor Relations Board data, labor information, employee information, and things that I would consider to be fairly delicate and sensitive in nature. I definitely, if I had that data in any organization, I would not be opening it up to any third party without significant contractual agreements and trust, and probably some sort of equivalent of a security clearance. In the corporate world, we don't have security clearances, but we do have trusted partners versus kind of more ephemeral partners. And I would make sure that it was definitely a trusted partner with specific before providing that level of access. And that's what I'm not seeing DOGE do in the government. I'm not seeing that care for the data or any specific work being done towards the governance, compliance, and security that we tend to take for granted. It's just a quick move, break fast, kind of Silicon Valley acting startup where you think that because you can simply move petabytes of data from one place to another that you should do it. And I think we just there needs to be some more care to it. What I would say a good thing and a bad thing that I saw from a tactical perspective. Good thing is, so the bad news is there was a Russian attack on our data, on the government data. Luckily, all those attacks were pushed aside because there are policies in place right now for non-US attacks to be automatically picked up and for those logins to be rejected on government data. So that's good. I don't think any foreign party should be able to get into American data. Like even our allies should not be able to get into our American government data at the end. So I think that's a good thing. I was a little surprised in this though, that the DevOps architect pointed out that there wasn't a SIEM solution in place. So I thought that was a little odd. I would think that our government data deserves better security, and if we're spending a little more on security there, that's not the worst thing our government could be paying money on. But hopefully, whoever's in charge puts better IT in place to protect our data assets going forward and to monitor what's going on.
It really goes back to in a certain sense, I don't care who you are, public, private, or not for profit. Mm-hmm. Everybody has constraints. There a lot more is being asked of people than one has either the time, money, or attention to pay it to really do well, right? Mm-hmm. So you have to pick your battles, and especially now when we're talking about a public agency which has all this data, has different conflicting things that they need to do. You can't resource everything to the level that you would want to cover all of the potential exposures or risks that the organization might face. Mm-hmm. So at that point, it's kind of like, well, which is the larger fire? And I realize that's not an ideal way to address the issue, but in a certain sense, it's kind of practical. But if you don't actually go through and have the conversation to look at, well, what are all the totality of things that you need to do in order to be able to serve the people you serve, and how do they all interact together? You're just playing with explosives. Mm-hmm. It's just going to blow up at some point, and the personal toll on the people that depend on these things can be significant, and that's the thing that really kind of gets me enraged.
Yeah, it's tough to watch. And I think just on a final note on that, I just want to say that I'm very impressed by the whistleblower for doing what is probably a career-ending event.
Yeah,
we know how this federal government works, and making a statement and a report like that is a federal career-ending event. So kudos on having the guts to be able to go through with a report like that.
and partially this is that whole perspective on speaking up because something isn't being done well. Mm-hmm. that goes back to the thing I was saying about how you're either rewarding or punishing people based upon what you're placing emphasis on. I think that, in this case, a whistleblower not only should be granted protections, but should also be rewarded because they're bringing to light a situation that needs to get addressed. And I'm of the opinion that in any organization that I've been part of leading, I've always wanted people to bring tough issues
Mhm.
and make them visible, because the last thing you want to do is have something blow up because, wow, you missed it. That's a gift you're being given. We
Yeah.
want to encourage people to have that kind of approach and way of thinking about what there is to be done.
Yeah, I think it's a competitive advantage when you can look at hard issues and
Yeah.
be able to bring them up and work on solving them. But we shall see.
Yes, indeed.
Mhm. So, moving off of that deep note, we thought we'd end the show with something just a little bit lighter, which is that, not as only is AI taking away all of our fun by writing music and writing poems, apparently they are now taking up running. Recently, there was a half marathon in China where they don't just have men's divisions and women's divisions now. They now have a robot division where 20 plus robots went head to head running a half marathon, and with the winner coming in 2 hours 40 minutes. So, is there anything left for us to do now that AI has taken all of our hobbies?
Well, it's interesting. And the thing that really kind of stood out for me about this was, I think back to and I don't remember whether you remember these, but those early Boston Scientific videos of the early
Mhm.
robot prototypes, kicking him around, and the dog versions of them,
Oh
and
yeah. Mhm.
think about where things are now, right? Where you have robots with skeletal structures that resemble humans that are now engaging in these types of activities, or dancing, or whatever the
Mhm.
particular issue is. uh, i I really find this fascinating because for my purposes, I think about it as the point of designing like this isn't just to emulate the human capability or behavior, because it's this. I'm not saying it's anthropomorphism run amok,
Mhm.
but rather it's thinking about how you design and refine approaches for building complex adaptive systems.
Mhm.
That's the value in actually doing it, not that you can emulate what a person can do. So I think from my perspective, we're early on in the journey, but we're well along the path. And I don't, I am not at this point concerned about seeing the Terminator in my backyard yet, but I'm certainly glad that my name isn't Sarah Connor.
True. Yeah, we're getting closer and closer to Skynet. It's hard to deny that AI is getting smarter. I do find uh, the like our focus on anthropomorphized robots to be a little odd, because if I were designing something from scratch to be as functional as possible, would
Right?
I choose the human body? Like we're amazing miracles and all that, but are we really like the most functional form that exists?
Yeah.
I'm just not sure that that's true.
No, I wouldn't say so.
Yes. But I'm also glad to say that that robot came in 240. My half marathon uh PR is 141, so I'm still ahead of a robot at one thing in my life. So
Nice.
I'm pretty excited about that one. Like, there's still 1 hour to go before I've been completely superseded by robots in every single thing that I can do.
But how long was the robot's recovery time?
I probably faster. I'm not gonna lie.
Probably. Yeah.
I get wiped out for a day after these things. But on that note, thank you so much for joining us for another week in This Week in Enterprise Tech. So we're actually going to be lucky enough to have Mr. Gonzalez here for another week. So please tune in next week. Join me and Ken as we look at
Yes.
the week in enterprise tech. Please like, subscribe, follow, and comment. Let us know what you want us to look at next. Thanks so much for joining us.
Take care, everybody.